Breaking right now. The world is watching the clock. Oil markets, governments, and millions of civilians are waiting. 8 p.m. arrives and Iran's lights do not go out. He said it clearly on camera during a White House press conference on Monday afternoon, with Steve Witkoff seated along the briefing room wall and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Caney standing beside him. He said every bridge in Iran would be decimated. He said every power plant in Iran would be shut down, burning, exploding, and never used again. He said it could happen over a period of 4 hours if they wanted it to. He said the entire country could be taken out in one night, and that night might be tomorrow night. He set the deadline, Tuesday, April 7th, 2026, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Those were his words. Those were his exact words spoken at a formal White House press conference, broadcast live on every major network, heard by governments across the world, by every oil trader, by every airline company rationing jet fuel at Italian airports, and by every parent in Iran who heard about the human chains forming around power plants. The deadline passed. Iran's power plants are still running. This is not speculation. This is not editorial interpretation. At the moment this script is being written, there are no confirmed U.S. strikes on Iranian civilian power infrastructure. The fifth deadline that Trump set for Iran during this war came and went the same way the previous four did, with the language of absolute certainty beforehand and silence afterward. The man who said the entire country could be taken out in one night has now set 5 deadlines, posted explosive social media threats about hell, and told reporters he is not concerned about committing war crimes, yet Iran's power plants remain operational. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. The war has entered its 39th day. The contradiction between the words and the reality has become one of the defining characteristics of this conflict, and every actor in the international system is now incorporating that contradiction into its calculations. To understand what that means and why it matters beyond the immediate drama of another expired deadline, you have to follow the complete documented sequence of events between Saturday night and Tuesday evening. Because that sequence contains details that headline coverage has not fully assembled in one place. And those details tell a story about where this war might be heading that official statements do not fully explain. On Sunday morning, April 6th, Trump posted on Truth Social a message that Iranian embassies around the world responded to by suggesting Americans consider invoking the 25th Amendment. The post read in verified quotes confirmed by multiple international outlets. Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Now, sau portid. He followed that message with another post giving the precise deadline, the Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The Iranian embassy in South Africa responded publicly, telling Americans to seriously think about Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, the constitutional provision allowing the vice president and a cabinet majority to remove a president considered unfit for office. Adak Santri Watts. Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf called the threats reckless and warned that the entire region could burn. Iran's presidential spokesperson Sayed Mehdi Tabatabai described Trump's messages as pure desperation and anger. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, whose yellowcake production facility in Artikhan had already been struck in a separate U.S.-Israeli attack, condemned the threats as violations of protections for peaceful nuclear facilities. On Monday morning, before the deadline arrived, a 45-day ceasefire proposal reached the desks of both Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi at the same time. It was delivered through Egyptian, Pakistani, and Turkish mediators after a night of non-stop phone calls led by Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir, who had been speaking throughout the night with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, Witkoff, and Araghchi. The proposal, tentatively named the Islamabad Accord by diplomatic sources, called for an immediate ceasefire, the simultaneous reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and a 15 to 20-day window to finalize a permanent settlement. The final in-person talks were planned for Islamabad, Pakistan. The deal reportedly included Iranian commitments not to pursue nuclear weapons in exchange for sanctions relief and the release of frozen assets. It was the most complete diplomatic framework produced in 38 days of war. Trump's response at the Monday press conference was direct. He called it a significant proposal and a significant step, but he said it was not good enough. He maintained the Tuesday 8 p.m. deadline while keeping Witkoff present in the room. Iran's response through state media was equally precise. Iran conveyed to mediators in Pakistan that it required a permanent end to the war. Iran's 10-point counterproposal included a permanent ceasefire across the region, guaranteed safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, reconstruction commitments, and the lifting of sanctions. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson made the position clear. Negotiations cannot occur under ultimatums, threats, or the risk of war crimes. A senior Iranian official told Reuters that Iran would not reopen the strait as part of a temporary ceasefire, would not accept imposed deadlines, and believed Washington was not ready for a permanent ceasefire. Two fundamentally incompatible positions with the clock moving toward ETA. What Trump said at that Monday press conference, in quotes reported by multiple major outlets, represented some of the most extreme language used by an American president about a foreign country in the nuclear era. He said every bridge in Iran would be destroyed. Every power plant would be shut down, burning and exploding. It would happen over 4 hours. The entire country could be taken out in a single night. When asked whether he was concerned about committing war crimes by destroying civilian infrastructure relied on by nearly 90 million people for electricity, water treatment, and hospital power, Trump said he hoped he would not have to do it. He also claimed the Iranian public might be willing to endure bombing to achieve freedom. Yet Iranian state media reported 14 million volunteers registering for the war effort, with calls for human chains around power plants and national flags being distributed across Tehran. The UN Secretary General warned that attacks on civilian infrastructure violate international law. European leaders said targeting energy facilities would be illegal and unacceptable. Iran's military command warned that any further strikes on civilian targets would trigger more devastating retaliation. Oil prices continued rising. U.S. benchmark crude passed $115 per barrel, while Brent approached $112, roughly 50% higher than when the war began on February 28th. Meanwhile, military operations continued. U.S. and Israeli jets struck near Tehran. Senior IRGC intelligence officials were reportedly killed. Residential districts were bombed. Buildings collapsed. Children were among the casualties. Sharif University of Technology was struck, destroying research infrastructure. Iran condemned attacks on nuclear facilities. Iran retaliated with missile strikes toward Israeli cities and threatened additional regional targets. Gulf states activated air defenses against incoming drones and missiles for the 41st consecutive day of war. Total casualties climbed into the thousands across the region. And then Tuesday arrived, 8 p.m. Eastern Time passed. The power plants were not struck. The bridges were not destroyed. The 4-hour obliteration campaign did not begin. Instead, the same pattern repeated itself. Deadlines announced with certainty passed without the promised escalation. March 21st, March 23rd, March 26th, April 6th, April 7th. 5 deadlines, 5 expirations. Iran's strategic calculation now rests on that pattern. Officials believe the deadlines function more as domestic political messaging than genuine military triggers. That calculation could change only if executing a threat becomes politically easier than extending it. Meanwhile, the economic pressure continues building. Oil remains above $100. The Strait of Hormuz disruption affects global shipping. Airlines ration fuel across parts of Asia. Financial markets feel the pressure, and the diplomatic framework known as the Islamabad Accord still exists. Neither side has rejected it completely. Iran rejected the temporary ceasefire but offered a permanent alternative. The United States acknowledged progress but demanded more. The gap between the positions may not be impossible to bridge. Both sides want the strait open. Both sides want oil prices lower. Both sides want to claim victory. The architecture of a deal exists. What remains uncertain is whether the political will exist to finalize it before another deadline appears. What happened at 8 p.m. Tuesday night is exactly what happened at every previous deadline. The clock expired. The rhetoric remained. The power plants stayed on. The war continues, and the world is watching to see whether the pattern eventually breaks or whether the deadlines themselves become the permanent grammar of this conflict.